Before I start, I would like to mention that this video is brought to you by Astonishing Legends. Astonishing Legends is a paranormal podcast that examines strange legends and mysterious events throughout history. More on the podcast later in the video. Since ancient times, people have believed in werewolves. Indeed, scientists theorize that such a belief may harken back to prehistory, to a time when our herbivorous ancestors began to eat meat. It is thought that in order to be successful hunters, our ancestors may have sought to imitate the prowess of the wolf by dressing in furs and painting their faces with wolf-like markings. This belief that humans can somehow channel the wolf and acquire both its physical strength and form, as well as its wild instincts, did not die with the dawn of civilization. Written testimonies have been recorded for thousands of years, describing men with the power to shapeshift into the form of a wolf. With that in mind, here are 5 of the darkest cases of alleged werewolf encounters. In ancient times, people who were thought to be able to transform into a werewolf were said to be afflicted by a condition called lycanthropy. Among the superstitiously inclined, it was believed that one could become a werewolf through magical means, or as a consequence of a curse from the gods. Gaius Petronius, Arbiter, a Roman courtier and author, was one of the first to write down a surviving personal testimony of witnessing someone transform into a werewolf. The year was 60 AD, and Petronius was considered to be a learned man of elegance and sophistication. Despite living in ancient times, belief in such superstitions was seen as beneath worldly men of courtly life. Thus, it is both strange and fascinating that he should mention having personally witnessed a man change into a wolf. In his testimony, Petronius describes having gone for an evening walk with a soldier whom he describes as being as bold as death. On that night, the moon shone bright as day. When coming among some monuments, the soldier rather peculiarly started to talk to the stars. Petronius continued walking, singing to himself and counting the stars without a care in the world. Realizing he had left his companion behind, he looked back at the soldier and was greeted by a frightful sight. According to his testimony, he saw him strip and lay his clothes by the side of the road when, in a crack, he was turned into a wolf. Immobilized by fear, Petronius witnessed the wolfman howl up into the sky before running into the woods. In a state of absolute dismay, Petronius continued along the path to his destination, which was the farm of a friend of his. There the courtier was scolded for being late. The farmer told him that a wolf broke into the farm and had butchered all their cattle. All Petronius could think of was the shape-shifting soldier and how he may have reached their destination before him. The farmer continued to explain the evening's event. In the course of the raid, one of the servants has supposedly fought off the wolf and had run him through with a pike. After a sleepless night waiting for daylight, Petronius ran back to his home. He claimed that he found the soldier lying in bed, with a surgeon attending to a wound. Somehow, someone had injured the soldier's neck in the night. Petronius was convinced that the soldier's wound had been sustained in the course of the raid on his friend's farm, and that the soldier had been the wolf they described. Disturbed, he never again associated with the soldier. Olaus Magnus was a 16th century Catholic ecclesiast and writer. He was known as a man with a great sense of scientific scrutiny, having created the most accurate map of the Baltic northern regions of the time. However, after the success of the religious reformation in Sweden, Magnus was forced to flee, exiled to Poland and eventually to Italy. There he wrote and in 1555 published his most famous work, the title of which translates into English as a description of the northern peoples. In his text, Magnus details a general phenomenon that occurred in the Baltic regions of northern Europe. As he described it, the inhabitants suffer considerably from the rapacity of wolves throughout the year. However, these numerous and aggressive wolf attacks were not regarded as such a serious matter, for there was something far more destructive and dangerous that northern Europeans had to endure. According to Magnus, far worse than natural wolves were men turned into wolves. Supposedly, it was around Christmas time that a multitude of wolves, transformed from men, gathered together, and then spread to rage with wondrous ferocity against human beings. Far from being at the mercy of ordinary wolves, the Ecclesiast stated that villagers could tell the difference between wolfmen and true and natural wolves. The werewolves' behaviour was easily identifiable. According to the text, when a human habitation has been detected by them isolated in the woods, they besiege it with atrocity. They devour all the human beings and every animal which is found within. Magnus wrote how werewolves supposedly congregated at a ruined castle in the thousands, assaulting the fortification by jumping over the walls. He also related the story of a nobleman who supposedly had in his retinue a peasant with the ability to turn into a wolf. Magnus's writings are often dismissed as a series of unsubstantiated accounts based on local superstition. When speaking about his observations, it is more preferable for academics to focus on what they are certain he was correct about, such as his geographical observations. Werewolves, they conclude, couldn't possibly be a reality. And indeed, it could be said that Magnus's descriptions of werewolves gathering together and attacking villages were superstitious rationalizations for bandit attacks during the Christmas period. After all, around Christmas, many labourers found themselves unemployed and often took to drinking and committing crimes. Historically, this has resulted in the holiday season having a mixed reputation, inspiring tales of Krampus and other demonic beings bent on destruction and wrongdoing. Magnus even stated that the so-called werewolves that ravaged the Baltics emptied tons of beer or mead from village cellars. However, as convincing as this explanation may first seem, there is a major flaw. Whilst bandits marauding across the countryside are of course a common occurrence in history, they are not commonly known for devouring human flesh en masse. This is a far more bestial, far darker trait. A trait which is perhaps only reserved for unnatural creatures like werewolves. In 1612, a judge in Bordeaux, France, wrote a book about bad angels and demons. Within it is the extraordinary case of Jean Granier, a boy of around 13 years of age. Granier was tried and convicted for the crime of lycanthropy. In other words, he was found guilty of being a wolfman. Marguerite Poirier was the first to bring him to the attention of her parents. She shockingly stated that he had repeatedly frightened her and other girls by threatening to eat them. Granier was described as having thickly matted red hair falling over his shoulders, pale eyes, and large hands with long black nails pointed like a bird's talons. His most peculiar characteristic, however, were his large canine teeth that protruded from his overhanging lower jaw. It is claimed that Granier had told Marguerite and others that he had sold his soul to the devil, and in return was given the ability to transform into a wolf. The teenage boy admitted to attacking dogs and little girls in order to feast on their flesh. Disturbingly, the young girls were his preference. Their flesh, he said, was a supreme delicacy. Jean Gaboriant, aged 18, testified that Granier had specifically described 2 instances where he had consumed a meal of human meat, one of which he had shared with a fellow wolf. At first, the parents disregarded their daughter's stories as youthful fantasy. However, this changed when Marguerite Poirier was attacked by Granier one day and was only able to fight him off after a vicious struggle. After this, the case was taken to the authorities. This caused a general fear to spread in the area, for it had been reported that several young girls had recently vanished mysteriously. Granier was promptly arrested and brought before the Parliament of Bordeaux. His case and testimony were recorded in full. The charge of Marguerite Poirier is correct. The 13-year-old boy is recorded as having said, "My intention was to have killed and devoured her." Granier denied none of the charges and elaborated fully on his crimes. He described meeting a man in the forest who signed me with his nail and proceeded to give him a salve and a wolfskin. He claimed that it was with these items that he was able to transform into a wolf and roam the country. The details of Granier's crimes were horrific. He testified to several instances where he had devoured the young. In one horrific instance, he even admitted to having eaten a newborn. He explained that he had committed these heinous acts at the command of his master, the so-called Lord of the Forest. The different areas where Granier had done his dark deeds were identified, and it was discovered that the times where he stated they happened did indeed coincide with parents reporting their children missing. As hideous as his claims were, Granier did seem to be telling the truth. Marguerite even confronted the boy at court, insisting that she witnessed him transform into a wolf before he attacked her. By this point in history, French courts had moved away from regarding lycanthropy as a criminal offence, and instead saw it as a sign of insanity. Thus, Granier was consigned to a monastery to be watched over by monks for the rest of his life. 7 years later, the judge visited Granier. He reported that he found him to be very shy. His teeth, however, were still protruding, and his nails were still very long. It was then that Granier related the whole story to the judge, as it was when he first gave his testimony to the courts years before. The judge recorded everything faithfully. In the years since his trial, Granier claimed that the Lord of the Forest had visited him twice, promising him that he would soon be free again to spread terror across the country as a wolf. This, thankfully, was not to be. Shortly after the judge's visit, Granier passed away. Decades before Granier, the forests of eastern France are said to have gifted another man with the same ability and sinister taste. His name was Sheila Garnier, and during a hunt in the forest near Dole in France, he claimed that a spirit appeared before him and offered to ease his troubles. His anguish was caused by his lack of ability to hunt and provide food for his new family. Recently married and with a young child, the pressure of such responsibility was taking its toll on the Frenchman. Thus, the spirit supposedly gave him an ointment that could turn him into a wolf. From 1572 to 73, Garnier turned the area into a land of scarlet horrors. The bellies and legs of little boys and girls were devoured raw. He was never discreet about his actions either. Over 50 witnesses appeared at his trial and recognized him as a loup-garou, a werewolf. Indeed, authorities had been convinced that the terrible tragedies in the area could have only been caused by a werewolf. At the height of the drama, the authorities even issued an edict that encouraged people to track, hunt, and dispose of the werewolf in the area if possible. Soon after this, Gilles Garnier was apprehended by a group of workers, some of whom recognized him as a wolf, others as a man. On the 18th of January 1574, Garnier was forced to meet the flames for being a werewolf. Garnier was not the only one in the province who was accused of being a werewolf in the 16th century. Michel Verdun and Pierre Burgot were convicted of similar crimes as him. They also shared his punishment. In the centuries since, many have attempted to explain these cases of supposed werewolves as a superstitious way to explain real crimes committed by biologically normal men. Whilst this might be a valid explanation comfortably asserted from a detached position, the people on the ground at the time would have no doubt disagreed, for they clearly identify them as both man and wolf. Not only that, the accused in all these cases confirmed that they were wolfmen, albeit under torture. One would think that their crimes were terrible enough without having to add the detail of lycanthropy. Capital punishment would have been served either way. Another explanation may well be that these men truly believed that they were werewolves. Whether this belief was based in reality or not is questionable. Regardless, such instances did not go away as time went by, with some similar cases continuing to be recorded in the modern day. Before I discuss the final werewolf case of this video, I would like to talk about Astonishing Legends, a popular podcast which also explores in-depth, strange historical legends such as these. Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess have hosted Astonishing Legends since 2014 and have accumulated over 67 million listens so far. As you know, I love the details when it comes to research, and Scott and Forrest are brilliant when it comes to theirs. When they uncover the truth behind legends you thought you knew, they are extremely comprehensive and explore every possible angle. So far, they have covered a wide array of cases, everything from Skinwalker Ranch to Bigfoot to a case of demonic possession known simply as the sludge entity. They have even discussed werewolves. Scott and Forrest's approach to the spooky, strange and mysterious is similar to mine, in that they have no agenda. They present the details and the theories from the skeptical and mundane to the far edge of fringe, and then let you decide for yourself the veracity of the stories at the root of these mysteries. Not only that, through exhaustive preparation for their interviews, you'll hear the most comprehensive and thorough conversations with some of the best experts, authors, and researchers. So be sure to listen to the Astonishing Legends podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and check out the links in the video description. In the late 1980s and early 90s, an American reporter named Linda Godfrey investigated a case that involved a rash of strange sightings in the state of Wisconsin. It was within a rural area around Bray Road that several people reported seeing a large bipedal creature with brown fur and canine features. The creature, it was said, was not identifiable as a known animal. Some even whispered that the beast was half man, half wolf. At first, Godfrey investigated the incidents with skepticism. Soon, however, she would become convinced by the number of testimonies. Since then, she has authored several books on the subject, and is now considered to be one of the leading authorities on what is now known as the Beast of Bray Road. Godfrey's research was rigorous, with her keeping a written record of eyewitness testimonies. In an article published in 1991, she included quotations from one such testimony, which came from a supposed eyewitness called Barbara. Barbara had been driving home one night along Bray Road when something caught her attention on the side of the road. According to her testimony, she approached what she described as a thing in her car. Its back was to her, but she could see, and was shocked to see, that it was kneeling on the ground like a human would. Its elbows were up, and its claws were facing out, as it ate something from the ground. As she drove by, the peculiar creature supposedly turned his head to look at Barbara. It was then that she realized the creature had big teeth, fangs, pointed ears, and glowing eyes. It was about the size of an average man, Barbara reported, 5'7" maybe, about 150 pounds. When Godfrey interviewed Barbara in order to make a record of her testimony, she was surprised when Barbara pointed to a picture in a library book. The picture was that of a werewolf. Like this on this picture, the alleged eyewitness had said, referring to the big long nose and long chin of the beast that she had seen and the illustration of a werewolf in the book. This is exactly what I saw. This is it. This is what it looked like. As fantastical as Barbara's account may seem, she was far from alone. A local humane officer in the state at the time, by the name of John Fredrickson, had an envelope set aside in his office labelled werewolf that contained several documented sightings similar to Barbara's. In the years since the story broke, many have tried to explain what people saw on Bray Road. One of the possible explanations given was on the television show Legend Hunters. They ascribed the sightings to a bear suffering from mange. Yet, dismissing the sightings as being the result of an animal suffering from mange is problematic, as mange is a relatively rare condition amongst bears, having only recently become more common due to environmental factors. The likelihood of one or more animals with the condition being seen so frequently is rather low. Not only that, mange makes the suffering animal lose its fur. In the case of the beast of Bray Road, eyewitnesses often described the colour of the fur of the animal they encountered, with it usually being brown. This was indeed the case for Barbara, who stated that the creature she saw was a brownish grey. Surely the furless bare skin of a mangy bear would have left a strong impression on any eyewitness. Most mystifying, however, is how the mysterious creature was seen kneeling. Such behaviour unseen in dogs, wolves and bears is chilling, and suggests, if the eyewitnesses are correct, that the beast of Bray Road may have had human characteristics. Ultimately, however, the creature remains a mystery. It may have been an unknown animal, a misidentification of a known animal, or even a deranged person in a costume. Or it may just be that the werewolf of legend exists, and lives and is encountered in the modern day. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this and would like more of the paranormal, please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Be sure to click the bell icon next to my subscription box to receive notifications of all my new videos. And if you love the strange and legendary, do head on over to the Astonishing Legends podcast and listen to Scott and Forrest discuss yet more bizarre cases. Simply click the link in the description. Until next time.